Hi, so Caroline, thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me. I'm calling you from London and really happy to connect with you. Um, so just to introduce myself and why I'm interested in talking with you, I'm a coach. So I coach in the corporate environment and I coach leaders in different kinds of organizations, different settings. But at the same time, I'm also really heavily involved in Tantra. So I teach Tantra workshops as well. I've been in the Tantra world here in London for probably about 12 years, teaching and learning about Tantra, and it's a really important part of my life. And the word Tantra is in Sanskrit. One of the meanings ascribed to Tantra is weaving, and I'm really keen to see how the two worlds of kind of traditional corporate coaching lifestyle and the worlds of Tantra can be woven together. So that's the object of my research. So I'm doing some research right now at Warwick University, looking at Tantra coaching and looking at how it's evolved, what it is, and how it might be applied into mainstream coaching. So I'm really happy to talk to you, Caroline, because I understand that you're really involved heavily in coaching and you're a tantrika. But I'd love to hear more about you and where you've come from and what's brought you to this place. And maybe ask you also some really specific questions about how you have evolved and how you manage your practice. So thank you so much.
So going to jump time zones.
Well,
and connect with you across the pond today.
Yeah, well, it's early evening here in London. I guess you're in the morning in the States there. So thanks so much for your time. So let me just ask you, Tantra. Caroline, I came across you because you're a Tantra coach and found your profile and your website. Really interesting stuff on there. Could you perhaps explain to me a little bit what your journey has been into Tantra?
So many ways I could answer that question. Well, I kind of got into Tantra quite by accident. I had come out of the corporate world. Actually, I lived in London for 5 years and I worked at Merrill Lynch on the largest trading floor in Europe.
Okay.
So very far removed from the Tantra world. And I'd gone traveling for 3 years and ended up choosing to live in America, in California. And I was at an experiential community, kind of a living workshop, and I discovered something called energetic sex through a guy called Reid Mihalko. Mm-hmm. And while I'd always been really sex positive, I'd never experienced sex with an energetic component. So it opened up a whole new world to me.
Yeah.
And then I dived into a relationship with a Tantra teacher for about 9 months. And I honestly thought it was a distraction on my path. I'd spent the last 2 years deciding if I was going to become a therapist or a psychologist. And I'd actually decided I was going to become a life coach.
Okay.
So I'd actually picked up the school that I was going to, study coaching at, and I kept delaying going to visit the campus and actually sign up because I was having all this great tantric sex.
Yeah.
And that was this delightful distraction. And when I went to the campus, it honestly, even though it's like one of the best schools that you can study at in the States, it just felt completely dead to me.
Yeah.
And again, I thought, this Tantra thing, I'm just having hot sex,
Yeah.
So anyway, I stayed training kind of unofficially with this Tantra teacher in relationship. We were practicing lots of red Tantra, which involves sacred sexuality.
Yeah.
And he was, he literally was making me work. He would make me do breath work. And I was like, I don't want to know how to breathe. I just want to have the good sex.
Yeah.
But about 6 months in, he said to me, I've taken you as far as I can go now. You need to go and start studying with some of my teachers.
Yeah.
And so he took me off to like an official Tantra weekend where I studied originally with Charles Muir from Source Tantra.
Okay.
And at that weekend, I was like, oh my goodness, it's so different to experience this in a group setting and to really feel the white Tantra, the meditation and the breath work in a group context. So I signed up right there and then for the teacher training.
Great.
And Yeah, it really was exciting, but all the way along, I kept telling them through the Tantra training, I said, I'm never going to do this professionally.
Yeah.
I actually booked sessions with the private teachers and did one-on-one sessions so that I could refer my coaching clients to them.
Yeah.
But it was really profound as I got to practice doing hands-on one-on-one sessions and watching the power of this work and the tangible shifts it made in people's lives.
Yeah.
It was just undeniable how profound this work was. Yeah. And I'm a trauma survivor, and I was watching the shifts in my own life where I'd spent years in therapy, slowly chipping away at some of the stories I'd created around memories. Yet with Tantra and using a somatic approach, we were pulling chunks of the onion off so quickly. Yeah. And it really got me inspired that I wanted to give back. So that's kind of the short version. You're welcome to ask questions from
Caroline. How long ago was it that you were brought into this world and that you started doing these workshops?
It was actually only a really short time, 4 years ago. Wow. And now it's actually 5 years ago since I discovered energetic sex, coming up on that anniversary. And literally, I think today is the anniversary of my teacher training my first teacher training 4 years ago.
Great.
But I took a pretty deep dive because I was studying right from a month in, 15 hours a week.
Yeah.
I took this very seriously because I understood the power of this.
Yeah. And so you did you did teacher training in Tantra as well as learning and being on your own journey. Was that accredited in any way?
Yes, so it's the training was done by the Source School of Tantra Yoga, which is run by Charles Muir and Leah Elchin. So I'm a certified Tantra educator because just like he said, anybody can decide that they're a Tantra coach. Yeah. And that can be meaningless. And I think it really is important to study. Yeah. So I started with Source Tantra, but I've now studied with a range of different teachers to really facilitate me finding my own voice in this work.
Yeah. So you've got your own practice now, Jewel in the Lotus. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do and what your offer is?
Thank you. Well, I actually do a number of different things. So I do offer coaching kind of woven through, there's that word again, woven through a lot of what I do. And I am available for in-person, phone or Skype coaching. And I do that with clients all over the world. Yeah. However, Tantra is really a transmission practice, in my opinion, and there are limits to what you can do just in talking, right? You have to be in the presence of somebody, and that nothing replaces an experience.
Yeah, sure.
So a lot of the ways that I teach is very experiential, and in my classes, at workshops and retreats, I'm obviously coaching people through different tantric practices. And there's some schools, and a lot of the lineage Tantra comes like this, but even the old school Neo-Tantra teachers teach what I call the guru model, where someone sits on a stage and they talk and you learn. Yeah. While I think there's value to that transmission, I think the embodiment of the practices is so much deeper when you actually get into practice. So I teach in a very experiential way. Yeah. And then in my private sessions as well, I was trained to do 90-minute sessions, but that never quite felt like enough. Yeah. And in my experience, most people are just getting into the good stuff at around an hour.
Yeah.
My sessions are 2.5 to 3 hours, so that we allow for quite a lot of coaching, where we're just talking in the first, it's about half an hour to 45 minutes of the session.
Okay. Right.
And I do that quite specifically as well because in the West, the mind is glorified. So we make space for the mind. Yeah. We give it space. We can talk, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we move into pranayama, breathwork practices to quieten the mind and then into the body.
Yeah, excellent. And when you, because I'm really particularly interested in your one-to-one work, your coaching work that you do with individuals, which is what I'm really looking into right now in my research. When you have a client, do you tend to have a client for one single session, or is it a number of sessions? How does that work?
So I do have people that come and see me for a one-off experience, But mostly I am juiced up by those that want to come in for a deeper dive.
Yeah.
So in general, I say to people, you can have a big breakthrough in 5 sessions, but if you really want to make lasting change, and depending again on their issues, I'm going to recommend at least 10 sessions, which may sound long, but if you've had a lifelong pattern of something, 10 sessions actually isn't very long at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then those that are really committed, that really want to make powerful breakthroughs and transform their lives, we end up working together for about a year. That's where I see. And I have a trauma bias as well. Probably being a trauma survivor, I tend to attract a lot of students with trauma.
Yeah.
And so then we have longer things to unravel.
Is that what you put yourself out as a coach that could work with trauma survivors or trauma people?
I do, and I want to phrase that in that most of my, well, let me say this again. I think there is a large gap in the Tantra world where trauma is not being addressed and people are being told they're competent to support people through trauma when they're not. I've certainly received sessions from people that were grossly incompetent with the best intentions. Yeah. So, I've done dialectic behavioral therapy. I've also done EMDR. I don't practice EMDR, but I've done it. And what I do is I have a very good sense of when I'm able to hold for a student. Yeah. When things get beyond my capacity, I have trauma specialists that I work with, and then I actually resource out, and often we work as a team. Yeah. So the person is really getting the quality care that they need, and I'm not just fumbling around in the dark.
Okay. Great. And do you work with both men and women?
I work with people of all genders, so that includes those that identify as men and women and the whole gambit of gender spectrum in between.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask a little bit more about people that are coming to you. So people are sometimes presenting with trauma in their life. What other reasons do people come to you for Tantra coaching?
Great question. So sometimes people are sometimes they just want to come and have a mind-blowing experience, right? Yeah. That's one reason. Pleasure is so nurturing. And the power of pleasure to transform is really profound. So that's one reason. They want to come and have a really amazing experience with somebody who's an expert and can take them to an experience in their body that they've never been to before. Yeah. The other is that they're coming with some kind of sexual challenge. And it could be, say, erectile dysfunction, or they're wanting to learn how to orgasm, or they're wanting to learn how to last longer in bed. So they're wanting to learn ejaculation control and mastery. So there are a number of techniques that we can work with to support them in whatever challenge it is in their sex life that they're having. Yeah. And then many people come for intimacy and connection, which can simply happen in the session with me. But I'm most interested in empowering people even beyond the time that we spend together in that session to really develop skills outside of that. So it could be that they don't have enough touch in their life. Yeah. It could be that they don't know how to date or connect with a person. Then we're going to work on communication skills. Yeah. It could be that they don't know how to ask for the kinds of pleasure that they want and desire. Or that they're having, like I work with couples as well. So, maybe the couple have no idea how to connect, or their sex life has gone stale. I worked with a couple who hadn't had sex in 14 years. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So finding ways to reignite those pathways of intimacy and connection.
Yeah. Sounds great. Sounds like you're providing some really amazing experiences for people. So let me just go back a little bit to your practice. I'm interested in having a look at what Tantra coaches do and how that maybe aligns or compares or differs with coaching in more of the mainstream corporate world. So you developed and trained in Tantra and as a Tantra educator. Did your training incorporate elements of coaching? Were you trained specifically in coaching skills, or was that something that came separately to you?
Yeah, I would say the art of holding space. Do you use that word in England?
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Okay, great. I didn't know if it was a California
thing. I think it's come from California, right, and it's reached London after a few years.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So really learning to be present with somebody, and how to ground so that when people run into a trigger or when something big comes up in a session, that I was certainly taught. I was definitely taught skills or coached in skills on how to work with people's bodies.
Yeah.
But in terms of, the deeper emotional development or how to actually coach people in their life strategies, I don't feel like that was actually addressed in the Tantra training. That's come from other things that I've studied and also my own experience.
Sure. Yeah,
I was running a business before this, which was a professional organizing business.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up is because what I realized was, aside from the fact that people were inviting me in to deal with their stuff, what was really going on was there were deeper issues underlying the stuff and the reason they were hoarding, for example.
Right.
So looking at those underlying issues, I spent 5 years doing that and holding space for people in that arena, which I really think prepared me for this, as well as my work on my own individual therapy. And I also worked with an organization called the Human Awareness Institute.
Oh, yes, I know. Yeah.
Do you know about HI?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I'm not experienced them, but I know about them. Yeah.
What's that?
I haven't experienced them myself personally, but I do know about them. Yeah.
Well, they do workshops in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships.
Yeah.
And there, initially I was just an attendee, but then I was part of their support staff as an assistant, and you got trained in things like active listening, where you were actually listening and how to listen and how to reflect back. Yeah. So I think it was in trainings outside of the Tantra realm that I actually learned more about coaching per se.
Yeah. Okay, great. And you said you were planning and thinking about doing some training in life coaching. Is that something you ever took up or did, or was that something that remained a plan?
Yeah, that remained a plan because my vision shifted.
Yeah.
And I started focusing more on things that would target the Tantra work I was doing specifically.
Yep.
I did attend training organized by a coach called David Wood that pulled in a number of different coaches. Jack Canfield was there, Reed Mahilko was there, a guy called Satyan Raja from Canada. If you need his business name, I could look it up for you. I'm forgetting in this moment. But, there were a number of coaches there, and there they were actually training us on how to coach and how to do intake calls. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. So one of the things, I'm just going to ask you a few of the practicalities. One of the things which, here in England anyway, if you're a professional coach, is that we need to be really recognised, we need to be accredited with a professional body and also insured. Are those things which in Tantra coaching are elements of what you need or what you do?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do my legal disclaimer first. Please go, if you're watching this in the US, please go and look at the laws in your state and don't go by what I'm saying. I think it's really smart. I mean, I know therapists, for example, have insurance, so it's wise to have insurance, liability or otherwise. What I strongly recommend, and I actually have a blog about this too, which you can find on my website. I do recommend if somebody's looking for a Tantra coach that they actually go and see who they've studied with and make sure that is recognized on the Tantra School's website. Yeah. So, for example, I've just launched a Tantra School, sarasatantra.com, and our new graduates are all going to be up on the website so that you can know that they actually have done some training.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Great.
The trick is that in the US, there's no governing body.
Yeah.
Right?
As in the UK. Yeah.
Right. So there isn't one sort of standard. And in many ways, Tantra, at least Neo-Tantra, which is mostly what we're discussing, is quite new. Yeah. So there isn't one standard. I've created my own code of ethics for myself and also for my students. So, there's certain requirements that they have to fulfill in terms of ethics to continue being on our website. And I have a mentorship program coming up. Yeah. And for that, they also, unless they're adhering to these code of ethics, I won't put my name behind them.
With your code of ethics, is that something you share with your clients? Do they have access to it?
They have access to it through the blogs on my website, and then I have this. This is referenced in my. That's a great question. This is referenced through some of the workshops I teach, because I actually teach Red Tantra, so hands-on genital classes, and I have a strict policy where I don't date my students.
Yeah.
And I do that because of the transference, and you're nodding in agreement, but it's shocking, at least in the US, how many people are dating, not only dating, but, sleeping with their students. Yeah. And I mean, we see this in India through the ages with the gurus as well. So it's not a new problem, but I really think to create a safe space, it's important. So I do have a Google document available that I created with one of my colleagues, Dr. Charlie Glickman, of our written agreements about the ways we will and will not engage with the students.
Yeah. Great.
So if anybody asks for that, that's totally available.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the things
if you want access to that, I can give it to you too.
I'd love to see it. Yeah, perhaps we can exchange email addresses after, and I'd love to see that. Yeah.
Sure.
In terms of coaching, not Tantra coaching, but mainstream coaching here in the UK, probably it's the same in the States. Coaches are not required, but expected to have supervision, have some kind of a supervisor. What about in the world of Tantra coaching? What's your experience there?
So again, there is no requirement that you have to be supervised. And there are some, like sexological body work, I believe, which is not Tantra but is related, at least in their hands-on approach. Supervision can happen there. And I know there's a course called Somatica where they do offer supervision. The way I've handled that problem is that when I come up against something that's challenging, and I obviously did this more in the beginning, but I would refer out and I would go to somebody with more experience than me and say, this just showed up, what do I do? Yeah. And that also happens for me whenever something comes up around ethics, I go and check in. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I also, I mean, she's not technically my supervisor, but I frequently check in on professional issues with my therapist, who's a trauma specialist as well. Yeah. So that I have checks and balances in place. But I've had to create that for myself because it's a formal structure here.
Because it's quite isolating otherwise, isn't it? I mean, I'm lucky in London. We have a regular meeting of Tantra practitioners. So we meet about every 3 months, and it's like a check-in, sharing ideas, getting support. And it's a kind of like a supervision session with other people working in this field of Tantra, Tantra practice and coaching, whether it's hands-on or not hands-on. Finding it very, very valuable. But there's no requirements, but it's for your own sort of personal support, really, support network. Yeah. Right. What about ongoing training? Do you get ongoing training, or what do you do?
Absolutely. I mean, I always tell my students I'm working 10 times as hard as them to be able to support them in their work. Yeah. Right? And sometimes I'm only a couple of steps ahead of one of the issues, but absolutely. I mean, I continue to study with, I try and pick the best teachers I can find in the world. Yeah. I am getting, more and more selective because I really want to study with those that are exceptionally trained and who hold exquisite containers for the work. Yeah. Because Tantra is really pretty edgy shadow work. Yeah. And, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And not only in the realm of Tantra. I think it's really important to have a very broad scope. And while most of my focus is Neo-Tantra, I went to India with one of my beloved teachers, Gina Salah, last year. She has come through classical lineage Tantra, and she teaches the Tantra of sound called Nada Yoga. Okay. And there we were specifically, I teach a lot about mantras, and so we were teaching, or she was teaching, literally how to make the sound vibrations work through the body to open the energy channels. Yeah. And I went to India to study with the leading Sanskrit teachers in Varanasi. So, yes, absolutely. I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think our education can ever stop, really.
It's a lifetime commitment, isn't it? A lifetime commitment to learning Tantra, yeah. Great.
If we're going to invite our students, and you notice I'm using that word very specifically, I don't talk about clients, because I really want to create an educational experience for them when they come to me. And if I'm going to invite them to learn, I have to keep learning too. And I think it makes me a better coach because I keep being in the student role. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember what it's like to be a student and to learn something new or difficult again.
Absolutely. Um, Caroline, where do you see yourself evolving in terms of your practice as a Tantra coach? How do you see things moving and shifting for you over time?
Thank you. That's a great question. Um, I've just mapped out the whole of 2018 for my teaching schedule, and then that's already starting to flow over into 2019. I literally just launched this Tantra school, Sarasa Tantra, and I did that really. I was tired of complaining about the lack of integrity that I see in the Tantra world, and I make a point of not bad-mouthing other schools or other organizations, but I honestly didn't have anywhere to send my students that wanted to progress further than what I was offering, so I built it. Yeah. I'm like, great. And I often see people being thrown into very advanced practices and told they're competent when they're far from that.
Yeah.
So my full intention is to, continue to grow the school and bring in a new breed of teachers that I can certainly stand by, that have a strong code of ethics, that are really there in service to their students, and that will bring about a shift in the Tantra world, at least here in the US and hopefully beyond.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about a shift, not just in the Tantra world, a shift in the world, because I think the world needs this stuff. I think it does.
Absolutely. Well, it's been so exciting to watch some of them. Many of them are actually still working in corporate and watching how they're incorporating it.
Yeah. Well, this is my last question, really, because this is, as I mentioned to you before, what I'm really interested in, how can we bring those two worlds together, the worlds of kind of mainstream, corporate, kind of regular life, and the worlds of Tantra. What I notice is when I have worked with people who've come to Tantra, maybe who are new to Tantra, they say, wow, why can't we all have this in our lives? And I'm interested in how those two worlds can collide. What thoughts have you got about that? Thoughts about corporate world and the world of Tantra? Where do they connect, do you think?
Where do they meet? I have a lot of thoughts on that. So most of the people that are coming to me for one-on-one sessions are coming out of the corporate world. I don't know what the statistics are, but most people are working there. They're sitting in cubicles, or if they, C-types, CEOs, then they're sitting in their own office, and it's all very separate.
Yeah.
But when I like to dangle carrots of real life experience for people. So when I'm teaching breathwork or pranayama, I say to them, if you're stressed out before a meeting, there's a technique I teach called the complete breath, which you can find out about on my YouTube channel. And I say, do this breath work before you step into the boardroom.
Yeah.
Right? This is not only to allow you to have better orgasms, but it's going to help quieten your mind so you're really laser sharp and focused before you do your presentation.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're not bringing orgasms to the boardrooms, but you're bringing people.
Well, I think that can create some problems. But certainly bringing more joy or more centeredness or more freedom of expression. I mean, the other reality is if we're having better sex lives, when we're going in to negotiate a pay increase, for example, we're going to feel more empowered, we're going to feel more confident, and we're much more likely to go for it.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Right?
Totally agree with you.
So that's one way that there's an application. But, for example, I had the privilege of going to talk to some therapists at Kaiser Permanente, which is a big healthcare group in the US.
Yeah.
And, I walked into a very, I'm going to say, clinical office environment. This was there were no, frilly banners hanging everywhere, and I didn't wear a sari. I dressed up in a much more corporate way.
Yeah.
And again, I got them doing very experiential things. So I think a lot of these techniques are transferable, but we want to be mindful, because you do want to be mindful about touch, and you do want to be mindful. We can't be having, screaming orgasms in the boardroom. That probably won't work for mainstream culture.
No.
But we're no longer living in caves in the Himalayas, so we have to make this work relevant to people in their everyday lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do think generally, whether it's corporate or otherwise, but the culture is separate and alone, and you're a number behind a desk. And the more connection and communication we can create, and the more we can come, you and I were talking about this earlier, from an open heart, that then facilitates more vulnerability, more realness, as opposed to this competitive edge That's so often inherent. I know maybe it was because I worked in private equity. I was really competitive.
Yeah.
But it's going to make teams work together better if they actually talk.
Yeah.
And one of my students, I can't mention the company name, but it's a really big banking institution in the US, and she's taking breathwork techniques and intimacy exercises into her team building at this organization, which is so exciting.
Yeah, I love that idea. Excellent.
So it absolutely translates, but we've got to think about how we can actually make it relevant. Because if you use the word pranayama or mantra, and you or telling people about Shiva and Shakti in a corporate world, they're going to look at you like you climbed off another world.
Exactly. Yeah. But
right.
Make it relevant to them, appropriate, and let them see the benefits. And there's a lot of space for growth. I agree with you, Caroline. I really thank you so much for talking to me this afternoon. I've got so much wisdom and expertise from you, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I'm going to stop our recording now.